So to get started, I wonder though, if you can just tell us a little bit more about yourself on a personal level and how you found your way to this work. Because I think so many of us that are in this industry have found our way to this work through some of our own personal journey and some of our own personal struggles. And you and I, in a way, are kind of a microcosm of what is possible for women out there. So I think it's hopeful to hear that story.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So personal journey, how did I get here? It was a long time coming. I mean, I've always really been interested in the relationships and the dynamics between men and women. And a lot of that can be attributed to the fact that I was raised in a single parent home. My father was still very active in my life, but my parents separated, And as a little girl growing up in Detroit, excuse me, a lot of the families around me were single parents. It wasn't until I had gotten to college that I realized that most of my friends, their families were still together. And what I noticed within myself, and as I just grew, especially in my 20s before moving to where I am now, I live in St. Louis, Missouri, and I came here for law school, was that many of my friends around, it was a time where many people were getting these invitations for weddings and birthing kids and things like that. And I realized that my personal circle, we weren't getting those invites, and we didn't, we weren't, there were like no men, right? And so what we thought was no men around. And so I just really wanted to change that. I didn't want that to be a part of my life or my future. And I really, I did some soul searching. So I guess my work really has been perfected by looking at my own failures, of course, looking within and seeing the things that I had done wrong. So when I came to St. Louis and I attended law school, that really served as a catalyst that I saw some things that were happening culturally, society, where there were just strong, powerful, amazing women. And, in school, there are a lot more men. Well, at least in the African-American community, there are a lot more women than men who are pursuing higher education. And so this is what I saw, a lot of powerhouse women who were doing a thing. They were just so amazing. And yet, when it came time to interact with men, they were meeting men with that same level of energy that allowed them to be really successful as an attorney or win a new court competition or get an A, right? So, and I noticed that it wasn't favorable, right? So it wasn't bringing forth profit for them. And I'm a very observant person. And I knew that in order to really change society, because I believe that where women go, society goes, is that we got to get a grip on this thing. It's so amazing the strides that we have made as women, but at the same time, on the home front, when the families aren't in place, society, it can really destroy society. And so, as I mentioned before, I guess as you read, society really benefits when women are happy, whole, and healed, because we are the influencers, right? And we really reign in that position of influence. And so we influence men more than they influence us. So, I mean, that's like the bigger picture of how, it came down. I guess if I really want to get into it, the message was really, really perfected because, at the tender age of 30, that's the big threshold year for many women. And I graduated from law school. I, celebrated my 30th birthday. I failed the bar exam and I ended a 3.5-year relationship with this amazing guy that I thought that I was going to marry. But in my heart, I knew that he wasn't really the one for me, right? And I met a new man and everything was really, really great, but yet some fears started to creep up, things that I had done in the past, and just real fears of when you meet someone new. It's like, can I trust him? Does he like me? What's the path that we have? And so I knew that there was an opportunity for me to really practice what I had been studying for such a long time and really sharing on my blog at that moment. But, Michelle, I had did something that I would never do. And I know that we're both women of faith. And that was move in with him before marriage. And that really was just, I don't know, I felt like I betrayed myself. And that was really hard for me to do. However, I did it because, number one, I could either stay or, go back to Michigan. And, I just graduated. I wasn't employed. I didn't want to feel like a failure. And yet this man had opened up his home to me, and it was really an opportunity, and he really extended himself. And so I accepted because I knew that he was really serious about me. And the primary way that I knew that is because we were celibate. So I ended up marrying him And that was one way that I knew that he was really, serious about me. And because I had this fight or flight mentality, meaning that it was either my way or the highway, and that's what I was used to. I was so used to men doing for me. I was so used to the beta man. And when I met this masculine man who wasn't doing the things that I wanted him to do when I needed him to do it, when I wanted him to do it, it was difficult for me. And I was like, this guy, okay, he's not, he's bucking. He's not just standing down. But that's what I said that I wanted, right? And I didn't know how to handle that. So that really led me to really perfecting my message and sharing it with women to help them release that inner, like that emotional turmoil that happens, and really letting our guard down and stopping that film that's playing in our mind over and over again. And that's really what I believe is the primary step before meeting that, that right man, or even in the early stages of meeting what could be a wonderful, like the right man for the woman who's watching this. I know I said a lot because I can be all over the place. So hopefully that basis is the right woman.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing some of your personal journey, Monique. I just think it's interesting and probably hopeful for a lot of women to be hearing. One of the intentions of this series is to create that vision of possibility and what is possible. And so if you are in that period of struggle where Monique and I have both been, and you feel like you're not quite getting it, even though you might feel successful in other areas of life, then this is going to be a great series for you to get some inspiration from. So speaking of inspiration, I want to now pivot to a couple of other I words here, Monique, and we'll start with them one at a time. So one of the things that when I read your bio, that I want to swing back around to is this idea of being intentional. Yeah. And I'm going to have you speak to this in a moment, but the reason I want to bring this up is I think that for a lot of women, there is a resistance to feeling like they're being intentional about their love lives. Mm-hmm. We're intentional about everything else. We're out there making it happen. And yet in so many cases, we're kind of playing a more passive role in our love lives and just, hoping and praying that things are going to work out, right? And that wasn't what happened for me, even though I dated a lot and had boyfriends and that sort of thing. It wasn't until I got really intentional in the way I approached my love life, got some support and some mentoring, and did some things differently that things opened up for me. So I wonder, but I think the reason people are resistance to this idea of being intentional is because they equate it with maybe being desperate, right? So I wonder if you can speak to this. We're not talking about being desperate when we're being intentional. What are we speaking about, Monique?
Okay, so resistance and intentionality. So I want to speak to the resistance part first. Because a lot of it, and it really just depends on a woman's upbringing too, and a lot of it can be not necessarily desperation, but shame, and this sense of shallowness or vanity around the idea of wanting to have a plan when it comes to meeting the man who is for us, right, for you. Mm-hmm. And even when I speak to women, that's something that comes up. Like, I feel like I should just know this. I feel like it should just happen right now. I feel like, especially because, I attract a lot of women who are women of faith. It's like, I feel like because God knows my heart, that he's just going to come from the sky, and that's not always true, and for a lot of women, especially women who are 35, 40 plus, we think that love should have just happened by now. Mm-hmm. And that's the myth, right? The myth is that that love doesn't just happen. For some people, it can, and it can. For a lot more of women, we really have to be intentional about what we're creating. So that means just really being mindful about where we're going, how we're showing up, what our energy is really projecting, and the language that we're speaking, the conversations that we're having. All of that is into play when it comes to being ready for the right guy and meeting the man who is for you. And so there's no shame with it, wanting to be in an awesome, amazing, loving relationship that really can transform a woman. It's not a shallow desire. It's not a shallow desire at all. And I feel that more than desperation, what I've seen in the conversations that I've had with clients and other women is that there's shame attached to it, and that there is fear. And if I can speak to even my own experience as an expert, as a coach, where, you know, I have friends who, like, I can remember this one time, I can remember there was like this sense of shame of mine not wanting to say, hey, I help women attract men. Number one, because the snake oil meter can go up, right? But there's also this sense of, man, is that like that shallow that I'm thinking about boys and girls and like how we can really come together and develop families? That's something that I had to struggle with, because I remember one time I was at this place and this woman who, you know, she's an associate, but there's this sense of, oh, I don't want Monique around my man. So there becomes this sense of concern about that, you know, where we don't really want to speak it out loud. So I think that my experience and what I'm hearing other women say about just vanity or shallow or shame, those things working together can make it seem like, you know, there's this air of desperation, but it's really not. And there's nothing shallow about it. I really want to acknowledge the women who are watching this right now too, because this is the first step into leaping into their desires. So when it comes to really being intentional about what we want to create in our love life, it's really just about having that vision. Number one, vocalizing it, speaking it, say the word, speak the word, right? Because that creates the frequency and that sends out the vibration into the universe to know that the path is really working for you, right? So that God's will can be done on earth as it already is in heaven. Like, and I say this especially for the ladies who feel like they've lost hope and feel like because maybe they're too old, or, I mean, because, you know, this is your first time bride, you were in your 40s, if I remember correctly. And, you know, we can just lose a lot of hope and just wonder if this can happen for us. But I believe that it can. I believe that it will for the woman who really wants it in her heart and is actually taking steps to make it happen. And that comes with coaching and support, to be honest. I mean, no woman is exceptional by herself. So I don't know, what question do you want to ask me? I guess I should give some concrete steps about what it takes to be intentional.
Yeah, before you do that, I'd love to have you do that. Before you do that, I just want to echo something that you said there. And that is that I, too, Monique, believe that there is tremendous power when a woman actually speaks the words out loud and says what it is that she most desires and wants in her heart, without that shame, without that fear, without that embarrassment, without thinking this should have just happened for me, or without feeling like that's some kind of desperate statement to say, you know, I want to be in a loving, committed relationship, marriage with a man, whatever that is. I mean, for me, there was actual power in being able to say that. And during part of my years as a very successful single woman, I had that in my heart, but I did not speak it out loud. I might have had a prayer in my heart, but I wasn't out there intentionally saying, this is what I most deeply desire. And for me, it was actually a profound shift. That might sound like a small thing, but it was actually a profound shift when I owned that in a different way. I not only desired it, but it became something that I recognized that was one of the deepest wishes of my heart, and that it was something that was really significant and important to me in my life. And then I began to create structure and support around having a plan, like you said. And it wasn't until I did that that things started to open up for me. And then, as you mentioned, I happily became a first-time bride at age 43. We've now been married for 10 years. Mm-hmm. So come back to some of the steps in terms of being intentional. But I just really wanted to emphasize that point you made, because I feel like it's really important. And this is a new beginning in many ways. We always think of the new year as a new beginning. So it's that perfect time to speak that desire, that intention. And I believe that can be a beginning to manifesting it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. As you were speaking to, Michelle, one of the things that came to me is our ability to use our words. You know, scripture says that by our words we're justified and by our words we're condemned. And there's a book, it's called Your Word is Your Wand. So we as humans, we as women have the power to speak a word. And, you know, we can use our words as a weapon full of mass destruction, meaning that, oh, it's not possible for me. I just don't think that it can happen. Or, you know, I'm just always going to be like this. Or we can use our words as our wand full of magic and power and really speaking just belief and truth to power, really. So with that, the first step that I would encourage any woman to do right now, and this is really, I would see as the next 3 steps, because for the woman who's watching this, she's probably not new to trying to avail herself to love, right? So she's probably been on this journey for some time now and just hasn't met the right one as yet. So the first step is it's really the ABC. And the first step is just to acknowledge with a sense of gratitude where she is right now and where she has been. That also includes acknowledging the past relationship or the most recent dating experience, whether it was good or it was bad, right? And acknowledging that from that sense of gratitude, because gratitude is a multiplier and it really changes everything. And especially if a woman is coming from that spirit and that place of lack, meaning that I don't know if it's going to happen for me. Can it happen? Well, changing, like gratitude really shifts everything. And it's interesting because I just did a webinar on this, and there's a book called The Hidden Messages in Water, where this Japanese researcher, are you familiar with it?
I am. It's amazing.
Yeah, so this Japanese researcher, I don't remember his name right now, but really spoke words like gratitude and thank you and love and, things like that to water. And what happened was that they, I'm not saying this because but I'm saying this for the ladies, they captured it, and the words like thank you and gratitude really formalized into beautiful crystals in the water. So I say that it's really important for women to create this energy, this magnetic energy, right, by giving acknowledgement to their past experiences. There's a quote. When I was in Nigeria years ago, I taught English in Nigeria years ago, and I stumbled over this rock. And so one of my colleagues said, hey, there's this proverb, or it's a quote that says, a fool stumbles over a rock and keeps on going. But a wise man stumbles over a rock, he looks to see what tripped him, and then he keeps on going. So it's really about acknowledging our mistakes, our areas of improvement, but really giving gratitude, because every experience is one of growth, because our growth happens in the context of relationships. So that's one thing, is just really acknowledgement. The second thing, B, is belief. It is really exercising our belief. And that's something that we have. That's a sense that we have. It's, just like taste, touch, smell. The power to really exercise our belief, or a woman to exercise her belief, is something that we're all equipped with. And so for me, that really happened where, when I was thinking about the relationship that I ended before becoming married, he was a great guy, Michelle, like really, really good, a catch for anyone. And there was something within me that was like, well, am I foolish? Like I got to be, number one, crazy as heck. Number two, I may not be marriage material. Like maybe I can't be married because I'm never satisfied, right? That is what was in my head. I'm never satisfied. I'm always complaining. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. But yeah, at the same time, I knew that there was more. There was something in my heart that said, okay, Monique, you don't have to latch onto this because you feel like this is like the last guy and he's just such a good guy and you're not going to do any better than this. Because that's what I thought. I was like, this guy is good. And there's something going on internally with me that cannot accept this, and I need to work on that. But I really believe that there was more for me. Like I could really have what I wanted. And part of that was because I knew that I felt something before, and I wanted to experience it again. So I believed. I stepped out on faith, and I knew that I just had to exercise the power of belief. And the primary way to do that is to speak a word, to continue to speak words, to affirm ourselves, to see the love that we seek out here, whether it's an 80-year-old couple or, a little cute little couple, like a innocent love where maybe a little girl kisses a boy on his cheek, and he's just like, oh, so being able to see the love that we seek. And then third, and the most important step is to act, like use courage, and use courage by acting counterintuitively. That means doing the thing rather than doing what we default to, what's familiar to us, because that's the thing that's keeping a lot of women single right now is, we default to what we know because we only know what's familiar to us. It's to doing that thing that is counterintuitive. So, for example, one of my patterns was to, like, I could spend a whole day with my man. I could spend a whole day with him. And there was a meme about this too. I could spend a whole day with him. And yet, at the end of the evening, if he says, hey, I want to go out hang out with my boys, I'm going to get the sad face. And I'm like, like huffing and puffing and pouting. And I didn't want to be like that. I didn't want to show up like that in the world, and especially not in our relationship. So rather than being like, well, when are you coming back? What are y'all doing over there? And really going into like this control mode, I had to recognize that pattern. So that's, within acting counterintuitively, it's really recognizing that pattern and that familiar response, because it's going to come up in our bodies, and we know, and do the opposite of that. So instead of that, what I would say is, oh, I miss you already. I miss you already. And that would send him home sooner. Like, I can't think of anything cool to say, but he would like come home faster. So, rather than like, oh, babe, well, where you going? I'm like, hey, I miss you already. I miss you already. I miss you already. I miss you. I can't wait to see you when you come home. That kind of thing. And it worked. He responded differently. And that's the thing, is that, the way that we show up, men will respond to a woman differently when she's operating in her allure and when she's taking the steps to prepare herself to get ready for that right guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I really like the ABCs that you've shared with us there. And just have a couple of little comments that I want to make again, just to echo some of your points. When you were talking about belief, I believe that is so fundamental, even if you can only hang on to a shred of belief. Yeah. And if you're having a hard time beating back that inner cynicism, I understand, because I've been there, and I've talked to so many women over the years that are saying, I just can't see how, where, or when the right guy's ever going to show up for me. I can remember being curled up on my bed in a ball in the fetal position, sobbing because I felt that so deeply. So I totally get it. But this faith that we have, this hope that we have, this belief, if we can allow that to have root in our hearts and to keep growing through the words that we speak and through the actions that we take, I believe that it not only becomes possible for you to meet and attract your Mr. Right and to have the kind of relationship you desire, but it becomes almost inevitable. And that might sound like a really bold statement, but I reached that point in my life. And then where I came to believe not only was it possible, but that it was inevitable. Mm-hmm. And that was a huge shift for me. And it took some support for me to get to that place of being able to make that shift, but it made a huge difference. It also made a huge difference in doing the C thing that you talked about, the courage, Monique, because I was no longer settling for being with the men that weren't right for me, or settling for Mr. Right now out of fear or out of insecurity, or because even though in my gut I didn't feel like he was the right guy for me, he was a great guy like you're describing. Yeah. I was able to have the courage to honor that inner guide that I have, whether we call it, inspiration from God, whether we call it feminine intuition, whether we call it gut feeling, whatever you want to call it, we as women are all gifted with that. And when we have the courage to listen to that, it does not lead us astray. It's when we question, doubt, push that back down, or ignore it, that we tend to go off into paths that don't lead us to a happy place. And then just one other thing I wanted to emphasize that you said when you said, to look for evidences, to look for manifestations of love around you. If you're single in a couple's world, and that can feel painful and it can feel lonely, when we can celebrate the evidences of love around us, the happy couples, the marriages that have lasted for a long time, the like my father who's been taking care of my mother in advanced stage Alzheimer's, when we can see after 50 plus years of marriage, if we can see these evidences of love and celebrate them, then we can actually use those things rather than making us cynical or upset that we don't have them. We can use them as evidence that divine love, that human love is out there in abundance. And I think it can help us to keep going through these ABCs of love. So I just wanted to emphasize those points.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the truth. That's the truth. I can't even add anything to that.
Okay. Well, I have another question I'd love to ask you. And this is also a word that you and I both use a lot in our own work and with our clients and in our own love lives. And that's being inviting, being inspiring, rather than being instructional in our relationships. You gave an example of that where you said, I miss you already. Yeah. But I wonder if you can speak to this a little bit more, because I know this is a foundational piece of your work, is how we're showing up in our femininity and our interactions with men.
Yeah. Okay, so, well, number one, I guess where would I start with that? Okay, because there's so much. There's so much to discuss with that. It's all about this inspiration versus manipulation versus control versus obligation, right? Being women that can create that invitation and lure, like really draw men to us versus like a woman, you know, who like encourages her man to come home rather than forces him to come home. I'm sorry. So was there a specific question, Michelle, or just kind of talk about it freely?
Yeah, I don't know if I asked you a really specific question, but I do want to talk about this a little further, because I think if I'm asking you a question, I guess to ask you a direct question, it would be is, how can a woman create that space for that man to show up as a man without him feeling like he's being bossed around, manipulated, or controlled? You know, like you talked about, some of the things that work so well for us in our professional lives, you know, to get an A in law school, or to go for it in that career, don't always serve us so well in this dance between a man and a woman, particularly if you're a woman who wants a masculine man. So I guess I'm just looking for, you know, and I know there's so much we can talk about here. We could talk all day about this, but I'm just looking for any particular tips or ideas that you have as to how a woman can be invitational and create that space for a man to be in his masculinity so that we can be more successful in that dance.
Yeah, absolutely. There's only one word, one tip that comes to mind, and I'll share it, you know, through my own personal experience, is that one of the things that I noticed within myself was that upon meeting a man, I was just so light and fun and whimsical, and I'm easygoing. I don't care if you come or go, you know, whatever it is. And, you know, the older we get, the more difficult it is to get back on that horse. So now, you know, and one of the things that I noticed is that when I entered into a relationship, all that changed. It was about like expectation, and I'm already projecting and forecasting what's going to happen. So that means that I'm not being present in the moment. And there's one word that comes to mind, and it's attachment. And one woman shared a quote with me. I don't remember her name, but one of the things that she says that I oftentimes share with women is that anytime women like us, you know, we're attached to expectation or outcome or performance, we kill any possibility for connection and inspiration or romance or just, any sort of inspired behavior or act. Anytime we're attached to that. And that's the thing that can cause women like me and, you know, women that I serve to be controlling, to go into mommy mode, you know, mother hen, like the fears really start to swell up because control is really rooted in fear, as Lord Doyle says. And so detach. And so when we're detached, what that means is that we can be really present in the moment without having to project. So let me share another way that this came up. And of course, I got a story for days now. One of the things that I noticed with my husband before we met, like he was just so happy with some pizza and like chicken wings, right? So happy he could eat that all day. And in my mind, we weren't even officially in a relationship then. But in my mind, I'm already projecting and thinking like, oh my gosh, this man cannot just like chicken wings and pizza. Like I want someone who's cultured and worldly, you know? And in my mind, I'm thinking, this is bad because if we have children, like, you know, I don't want them to think that, okay, we just want chicken and pizza like daddy. I don't want them to have this basic palate. I want them to enjoy, you know, because I'm Jamaican. So I want them to have Jamaican food. I want Indian food, Thai, Vietnamese, Italian, all of it. And what that meant was that in the moment, number one, two things, that affected the lens through which I saw him because I forfeited connection in that moment, right? That was just, rather than seeing him as easy to please, right? Which means that I don't have to worry about making lavish dishes and whatnot. I can just create something and be like, here, babe, and he would love it. Rather than seeing him as easy to please, I was viewing him as like, this guy's just so basic. Like, he's just not going to do it, you know? And so those are two things. Number one, the film, the way that I saw him, the film, like the filter that I was looking through was tainted and it was jaded. And then number two, it was bad because I lost the connection. I forfeited that connection in the moment. It was because I was attached. I was attached to the outcome, and I was already predicting and making plans in my head, which keeps me not in my feminine because I couldn't see him in that moment. And that's one thing, like if for women who really want a man to be on you, you really have to see him and you have to accept him for who he is in that moment, like not changing him at all. And so when a man feels seen, especially by a woman that, you know, that he really admires and that he loves, that really like nourishes and magnifies his masculinity, which at the same time protects, preserves, and magnifies our own femininity, right? Because we women, we really want to feel feminine. At least women, like, I want to feel like you and me, right? Mm-hmm. But we have to really nurture that side of him. So the rule, in order to create more of that inspiration, less manipulation, less control, less dictatorship, is to detach. It's to really detach, but don't detach from the person. Detach from the outcome, detach from how it's going to happen, detach from the forward future forecasting, foreshadowing, projecting. So that's my tip.
Yeah, it's a very, very important piece. And I think as we do that, we allow some space for the man to step into the relationship, step into his masculine role, step into pleasing you, step into being there for you. And that's in part what helps a man fall in love with a woman. Whereas if we're controlling or trying to manipulate or move things along or have things go according to our little plan, then, you know, what's he going to do? He's either going to be repelled by that or he's going to lose his motivation because we're doing it all. And I tell women out there, I think we're creating a whole tribe of lazy daters when it comes to men because there are so many women that are stepping into that role. Mm-hmm. And of course, you know, it becomes more of a awareness, especially if you're a woman who's out there really making it happen out there in your professional life, and you are always focused on, you know, outcomes and, you know, the latest quarter's earnings report or, you know, sales goals or whatever might be related to your particular job or industry. Those things that have made us really successful in our careers and even competing and exceeding in many cases what men are doing in our fields, companies, or industries, don't always serve us so well in our love life if we want to be able to feel feminine and to be cherished as a woman by a masculine man. So yeah, relinquishing that, those expectations and the control, and as you use the word being detached, and I like that you clarified it's being detached from that outcome. And especially this is important, I think, in the early stages, because we can, especially as we get a little older, we get so anxious or excited or wanting to figure it out or not wanting to waste time that it's hard just to be present in the moment and to just explore an initial date or opportunity without jumping 10 steps ahead. Right?
Absolutely. And there was something that I just want to touch on that you said too about lazy days, and that's a part of also like the inspiration part, is that we have to, I believe that the masculinity exists to be in support of the feminine, and that it is femininity to which masculinity is first attracted to. So that means we have to give the man something to respond to. We have to create that opening, create something that he can step into. If we're doing everything, if a woman is, you know, it's like her way or the highway, then there's nothing for the man to respond to. And that's the part that brings purpose to a man's life. Like, men really want to support women. They want to love us. They want to care for us. I really believe that. But if it's, you know, if we're doing everything and if we're not really creating that invitation, creating that opportunity to which he can respond to by allowing, you know, her feminine nature to be witnessed and to be seen, which comes with support. Like that's what we do as coaches, right? It can be really, really difficult. And that's the thing that can turn a man into a lazy dater, or even a woman too, right? So yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to consider, and just to have a greater awareness around this if you feel like you're not attracting or sustaining or inviting men in the way that you would like to. So this has been a really fun and juicy conversation, and I know we could go on all day because I know we're both really passionate about the things we're talking about, and I love dancing with you, Monique, and dancing also, by the way, is a very good analogy here, because when you dance, particularly if it's something like ballroom or salsa or that kind of dancing, one person leads and the other person follows, and if we're both trying to lead at the same time, we're going to step on each other's toes, right? Yeah. So, Monique, I also want to give you a chance before we wrap up today to just leave us with a little last piece of wisdom or a parting thought.
Okay. I thought about this not too long ago. Here's what I want to leave you gals with, and it's this: that the dots don't connect until you put the pencil to the paper. The dots don't connect till you put the pencil to the paper, and that means. That came up for me, Michelle, as you were speaking about, like laying in your bed in the fetal position and crying, and like not really seeing the possibility, not seeing what's possible for you. And it's so difficult to do that if we're not taking steps forward, right? So everything will become clear to us as we begin to take the steps forward, whether that means watching the rest, like watching this video series in completion, signing up for a call with one of, the experts, really taking a step forward and not being under the grip of fear. Because once you begin to take each step forward, you will see things become so clear to us, because like love is possible for you. And to believe anything other than that is a lie. It's like weight loss. It's sort of like the woman who believes that weight loss is not possible. It's just not true. And I say that especially because for me and for the women that I serve, oftentimes we can hold these emotional woundings in our body as evidenced by weight gain and weight fluctuations, right? And it's like, well, how can I get it off? Well, you got to take a step forward and just remember that the dots don't connect until you put the pencil to the paper, and things will become clearer for you. You'll have a lot more clarity, and you'll feel confident about the direction and the path that you're taking, and you can begin to see what's really, really possible for you. So I just want to leave you all with that.
Thank you, Monique. So yes, we're encouraging you to put the pencil to the paper and connect the dots in whatever way makes sense for you. So I want to thank you, Monique, so much for being here with us. It's been really delightful to connect with you again. Thank you. And I want to thank each of you for being here with us. You're to be complimented, because the fact that you're here means that you're exploring this area of your life on a deeper level. So we honor you and appreciate you for being here with us. Bye-bye for now.